Welcome back to Press TV World News. Russia has dismissed a U.S. call to cut ties with North Korea in response to Pyongyang's launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was speaking to journalists in the Belarusian capital, Minsk. He said the U.S. policy of ramping up sanctions on North Korea to roll back Pyongyang's missile and nuclear programs was not working. His comments come after a speech by the U.S. envoy at the UN Security Council. Nikki Haley urged all nations to, quote, cut diplomatic and trade ties with North Korea in the wake of the country's latest ballistic missile test.
North Korea test-fired a new type of intercontinental ballistic missile on Tuesday, saying it could target the entire US mainland. In a statement, Pyongyang said the new missile was significantly more powerful than the previous one it had tested. It further added that its weapons were meant to defend its sovereignty and territoriality in the face of the US threats. The test fire drew quick and widespread condemnations, and the UN Security Council convened an emergency meeting upon a request from the US, Japan, and South Korea. Addressing the Council, the US envoy called on all nations to cut diplomatic and trade ties with North Korea. She also threatened to destroy Pyongyang if a war broke out.
If war does come, it will be because of continued acts of aggression like we witnessed yesterday. And if war comes, make no mistake, the North Korean regime will be utterly destroyed.
The Russian ambassador, however, urged diplomatic means to resolve the crisis.
This is precisely the approach that was proposed by Russia and China in their joint statement of the 4th of July, when they proposed a roadmap of a gradual move toward a settlement starting with the principle of suspension for suspension, which envisions the DPRK stopping missile and nuclear tests, while at the same time the US and South Korea decreasing the scale of their military exercises.
China's deputy UN ambassador also noted that the top priority on the Korean peninsula is for all parties to show restraint and try to resume negotiations to end the tensions. Meanwhile, as world leaders are calling for an end to North Korea's missile and nuclear activities, some experts say Pyongyang's missile program will continue as long as it feels threatened by the US.
The world community needs to look at the bigger picture here, and that is that the North Korean government feels that its survival is being threatened. It truly believes that, and it looks at the historical precedents, the recent historical precedents of Libya and Iraq, and firmly states the position that it is not going to be deterred from its pursuit of weapons that it can use to defend itself.
Pyongyang, over the past months, has conducted several ballistic missile tests in defiance of international sanctions. However, as a war of words between North Korea and the US and its allies drags on, this is the fate of the people that remains at stake as a result of this saber rattling.
During an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council, the United States once again threatened North Korea with total destruction if war comes.
We have never sought war with North Korea, and still today, we do not seek it. If war does come, it will be because of continued acts of aggression like we witnessed yesterday. And if war comes, make no mistake, the North Korean regime will be utterly destroyed.
Russia responded by asking for a drawdown of threats, while China argued that the stronger sanctions demanded by Washington should reflect humanitarian concerns. On Thursday, North Korea broadcast the launch of its largest missile yet, an ICBM with a range that could strike anywhere in the continental U.S., and the capability, Pyongyang says, of delivering a heavy nuclear warhead. Later in the day, peace activists met in Seoul to develop strategies to reverse the escalating tension, suggesting the historical root of the issue would need to be addressed.
Because of the war of words between Trump and Kim Jong-un, the situation on the Korean peninsula becomes even more dangerous. I think the Moon Jae-in administration needs to parallel the North Korean nuke problem with efforts to change the armistice into a peace treaty, which is the origin of this problem.
Adding to fears of an armed conflict, the U.S. and South Korea Korea plan to conduct large-scale Air Force drills, which are to run through next week. While the United States presses for stronger sanctions through the UN Security Council, both China and Russia stress the need for a strategy that leads to negotiations. Some analysts, including Professor So from Seoul National University, suggest the Olympic spirit may create momentum toward dialogue, with the Winter Games slated for February here in South Korea. Frank Smith, Press TV, Seoul.
Hey everyone, it's Dina Kalmeta here, and welcome back to CWW7 News. For today's broadcast, I wanted to bring you guys a short review of some of the headlines that have occurred within the last few days in regards to the United States and North Korea, as well as China and Russia, and also Israel and Iran. But I'd first like to start with this report from RT News, and the headline reads, Senior Russian diplomat warns of apocalyptic outcome of North Korean crisis. Here's that report. A Russian deputy foreign minister has said that the current nuclear missile crisis on the Korean peninsula could end in an apocalyptic scenario, and called upon direct talks between Washington and North Korea to prevent that outcome. He said, "To my regret, I have to say that there is an apocalyptic scenario for the developments of events in this region. I hope that the regional community will have enough common sense to prevent this scenario from becoming a reality." He also called upon senior officials in South Korea and the United States to exhale and start talks with North Korea over increasing tension. The Sun is reporting that Russia has stated that Donald Trump is provoking North Korea into nuclear war and is moving missiles onto Moscow's doorstep. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, also said that Donald Trump's administration was effectively trying to turn Japan and South Korea into American military bases to host missiles on Russia's doorstep. Speaking in Moscow, the 67-year-old said, "We are alarmed that in the last 2 months, when North Korea conducted no tests or rocket launches, it seemed that Washington was not happy about that and tried to do things that would irritate and provoke North Korea." The Russian diplomat, a key ally of Russian President Putin, was referring to joint military exercises the U.S. military had conducted with their allies in Tokyo and South Korea that saw 3 American aircraft carriers lead drills in waters surrounding the Korean peninsula. He added, "It's as if they are hoping that the North Koreans will lash out again, and then it would be possible to engage in military options." He also said that he thought the U.S. was using their confrontation with North Korea as a cover-up to build up military forces in East Asia, which include weapons that form part of the country's missile defense shield. He stated, "We are expressing deep concern with facts to back it up that Japan, along with South Korea, is becoming a territory for the deployment of elements of the U.S. global missile defense system, which is being rolled out in the region under the pretext of the North Korean threat." He made the comments at a press conference in Moscow with Japan's foreign minister, who defended his country's ties to the U.S. and its stance towards North Korea. Express News is reporting that North Korea is set for a missile launch in next few days, warns Japan. North Korea has been threatening another launch following a series of provocative tests earlier this year. 2 missiles flew directly over Japanese territory, terrifying citizens and sparking a round of worldwide condemnations and sanctions. And now the despot Kim Jong-un could be set for yet another test, despite ever-strengthening warnings from his Western rivals. One Japanese diplomat warned today radio signals detected from the Hermit State indicated another test is close. Japan's news agency said the detection had been confirmed by government officials. One official told him there is a possibility of missile launches in the next few days. They said the test could be part of North Korea's army's winter training regime. It comes after a former U.S. admiral admitted he was scared to death by the situation on the peninsula. Mike Mullen said it's still a very difficult place to know what's going on. "I think Kim Jong-un is really working hard to achieve the nuclear capability, and I think he'll get there short of some deterrence." When asked whether nuclear weapons will be used, Mr. Mullen replied, "I don't know. I think it's more probable than it used to be, and it scares me to death, quite frankly." The Sun is also reporting that Russian President Putin has unveiled his Navy's most powerful nuclear submarine, which can easily outgun its American rival. The submarine is capable of launching 16 intercontinental ballistic missiles which can lay waste to cities up to 5,778 miles away. Although its U.S. counterpart, the Ohio-class sub, is armed with 24 ICBMs, they only have a range of 4,846 miles and can't plunge to the same radar-dodging depths. Russia's nuclear-powered Borei A-class sub has the ability to dive about 400 meters, making it hard to detect by sonar. Russia now plans to build a total of 8 of the super subs by 2025. Putin is spending double the amount on defense than Britain is, says Defense Secretary Sir Michael Fallon. And earlier this year, the First Sea Lord said the Royal Navy was facing its greatest challenge from Russian subs and warships since the Cold War. A senior Russian defense industry official stated that the main purpose of the underwater interceptor is to protect groups of ballistic missile-carrying submarines and to battle with enemy submarines. Moscow has been steadily building up and modernizing its military forces as global tensions threaten to pull Putin into a devastating war with North Korea. Earlier this week, he stated the ability of our economy to increase military production and services at a given time is one of the most important aspects of military security. And Russia isn't the only one building up their military. Newsweek is reporting that China has tested a 10-warhead missile that can strike anywhere in the world for a possible deployment in 2018. It goes on further to state that North Korea isn't the only country in Asia testing intercontinental ballistic missiles. Its neighbor China, which the U.S. has urged to pressure North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons program, is deploying one of its own. The People's Liberation Army of China is adding the next generation intercontinental ballistic missile to its lineup, primarily to show off its growing military clout and because it lags far behind the number of nuclear weapons the U.S. owns. Called Dongfeng 41, the missile has a 12,000-kilometer range, meaning it could strike anywhere on the globe from mainland China and can carry nearly a dozen nuclear warheads at once. It has a top speed of more than Mach 10. It can carry up to 10 nuclear warheads, each of which can target separately. Once the Dongfeng 41 goes into service, China's ability to protect its own safety and to prevent wars would greatly increase. It goes on even further to state that the missile can use decoy devices with the ability to cut through the enemy's defense systems, and that the official deployment could take place in the first half of next year. It is also being reported that Chinese nuclear bombers are on 24/7 alert amid growing World War fears. Here's that report. Warplane pilots and crew in China have been told to be combat ready at all times after a fleet of jets flew over the South China Sea. Bombers with the ability to carry nuclear arms flew over the disputed region on Thursday as China continues to clash with the United States. China's military boasted that the flyover proved that they could breach the disputed First Island chain. Chinese officials failed to confirm how many planes were involved in the drill. However, the planes can fly at speeds of up to 656 miles per hour. China currently has 15 of these planes in service since they were deployed in 2009. U.S. warships, including the aircraft carriers USS Ronald Reagan, the USS Nimitz, and the USS Theodore Roosevelt, are currently on exercise in the region. Chinese military observers said that the drill was a display of Beijing's new 24/7 doctrine following tensions in the region. He said the PLA is stepping up joint operation combat training as the Chinese president ordered them to be combat ready at all times. The Air Patrol also aimed at showing the PLA Air Force is ready to join with the Navy in the high seas for all kinds of missions. So definitely a lot is happening with Russia and China, the United States, as well as North Korea. But let's move on and talk about Israel and Iran next. Just a few days ago, the Daily Mail reported that Iran is set to send its warships to the Gulf of Mexico in a bid to establish itself as a global military power. The audacious move has been announced by Iran's naval commander. He said he intends to add submarines to the Iranian fleet's ranks in a move that could give the U.S. cause to fear a new Cold War with the Middle Eastern power. The Tasnim agency stated that speaking in his first press conference after taking the office, the Navy commander stated that Iran's naval forces will soon go to the Atlantic Ocean, visit some South American countries, and wave the Iranian flag in the Gulf of Mexico. Tasman also reported that the Navy's Sapar missile-launching corvette will head to the Caspian Sea next week. And the Daily Star is reporting that Iran has issued a chilling threat to Europe, warning it will increase its missile range so rockets can be launched at the continent. The deputy head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard warned that it may increase the range of missiles to over 2,000 kilometers, enough to strike Europe. The general stated, if we have kept the range of our missiles to 2,000 kilometers, it's not due to lack of technology. We are following a strategic doctrine. So far, we have felt that Europe is not a threat, so we did not increase the range of our missiles. But if Europe wants to turn into a threat, we will increase the range of our missiles. His comments come after France called for an uncompromising dialogue with the Islamic Republic about its ballistic missiles program. But Iran has repeatedly said its missile program is defensive and it will not negotiate on that. The United States has accused Tehran of supplying Yemen's Houthi rebels with a missile that was fired into Saudi Arabia in July. It has called on the United Nations to hold the country accountable for violating 2 UN Security Council resolutions. Iran has denied supplying the Houthis with missiles and weapons. It goes on further to state that the Major General of the Revolutionary Guard had stated last month that Iran's 2,000-kilometer missile range could already cover most of American interests and forces within the region. The Jerusalem Post is reporting that Israel has vowed to destroy Iranian positions within 40 kilometers of the Syrian border. A Kuwait newspaper revealed on Sunday that an Israel source disclosed a promise from Jerusalem to destroy all Iranian facilities within 40 kilometers of Israel's Golan Heights. The source, who remains unnamed, said that during Syrian President Bashar Assad's surprise visit to Russia last week, Assad gave Russian President Putin a message for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Damascus will agree to a demilitarized zone of up to 40 kilometers from the border in the Golan Heights as part of a comprehensive agreement between the two countries, but only if Israel does not work to remove Assad's regime from power. The report also claims that Putin then called Netanyahu to relay the message, and that the Israel Prime Minister said he would be willing to accept the deal, but that Israel's goal of eradicating Iran and Hezbollah from the country would remain. It goes on further to state that Israel has participated in responding to fire in the northern border and occasionally bombing positions, including a weapons depot and scientific research center that allegedly produces chemical weapons. Damascus and Jerusalem have exchanged heated remarks as well, with Netanyahu threatening to bomb Assad's palace and Syrian officials warning of dangerous repercussions to Israel's strikes on Syrian targets. Over the course of the war, Israel has operated several field hospitals near the Syrian border where those injured from the war are treated and subsequently returned to Syria. Some of those who have been treated have been rebels fighting against the Assad regime, leading some to say that Israel is assisting the rebels to unseat Assad. So definitely some very heated headlines within the last few days. I wanted to bring you guys a really quick military news update and get you caught